The space station called Meridian 7 floated in the darkness between three different star systems. It was old. Very old. The beings who built it had been teaching other species how to live in the galaxy for 10,000 years. They called themselves the Velith, and they looked like living crystals. Light moved through their bodies when they spoke, and their voices sounded like music played on glass instruments. Administrator Dexillan stood in the arrival chamber and watched the new students walk off the transport ship. There were 47 different species in this group. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some floated because they had no legs. One species was basically a cloud of orange gas that somehow held together and thought complicated thoughts. And then there were the humans. 12 of them walked down the ramp in a tight group. They wore simple gray uniforms and looked around with wide eyes at the massive station around them. Dexillan had read their files. Humans came from a small blue planet in an unfashionable part of the galaxy. They lived short lives. They had no natural weapons. They could not breathe underwater or survive in vacuum or communicate through thought. By every measure the Velith used, humans were one of the weakest species to ever reach the stars. Marcus Chen was 23 years old. He had grown up in a place called Oridon, which was covered in forests and rain. He had joined Earth's new space integration program because he wanted to see what was out there. Now he was here, standing in an alien space station, trying not to let his fear show on his face. The Velith administrator floated toward the human group. Light pulsed through its crystal body in patterns that were somehow beautiful and cold at the same time. "Welcome to the Galactic Integration Academy," Dexillan said. The words came out as musical tones, but somehow Marcus understood them perfectly. Translation implants, they'd explained on the ship. Everyone got them. You are here to learn how to become useful members of galactic civilization. Marcus noticed the word. Useful, not happy. Not fulfilled. Useful. The sorting took 3 hours. Each species was tested and measured and scanned. The Velith had machines that could look at your DNA and predict how well you would follow orders. They had devices that measured your brain waves and determined how quickly you could learn to think in approved patterns. The humans were sorted into something called Adaptive Training Track 7. What does that mean? Asked Sergeant Yuki Tanaka. She was the unofficial leader of the human group, a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice that made people listen. The Velith instructor assigned to their group was named Velmix. It was smaller than Dexillan, and its crystal structure had a slightly blue color. Track 7 is for species that require significant modification before they can contribute to galactic society, Velmix explained. You will learn to use technological implants. You will learn to suppress inefficient instincts. You will learn to think in patterns that are productive. Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. What kind of implants? Velmix made a gesture, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a small chip, no bigger than a grain of rice. The neural compliance device, the instructor said. It connects to your brain and helps regulate emotional responses. It reduces fear, anger, and confusion. It helps you focus on tasks. It makes you more efficient. It makes you more controllable, muttered Corporal Okonkwo. He was a big man from Nigeria who had been a soldier before joining the program. That thing turns off parts of your brain. Velmix's crystal body pulsed with yellow light. Marcus was starting to understand that yellow meant something like annoyance. It does not turn off anything. It simply adjusts. All species in Track 7 receive the neural compliance device. It is necessary for your success. The humans were given rooms in a section of the station reserved for Track 7 species. The rooms were small and gray and felt like hospital rooms. Marcus sat on his bed and looked at the walls and tried to understand what he was feeling. He thought about his grandmother. She had lived in the Oregon forests her whole life. She had taught him to climb trees before he could read. She had shown him how to find food in the woods, how to build shelters, how to survive. She had always said the same thing when he faced something difficult. The world will try to make you small, Marcus. Don't let it. The door chimed, and Yuki Tanaka walked in. She sat down on the only chair in the room and looked at him with those sharp eyes. You're thinking about refusing the implant, she said. It was not a question, aren't you? Yuki was quiet for a long moment. I've been reading about this place, she said finally. The Veleth have been running this program for 10,000 years. They've processed billions of beings. Every species that comes through here either takes the implant or fails out. What happens to the ones who fail out? They get sent back to their home planets. They're classified as non-contributive. Their species gets marked as unable to integrate. They get cut off from galactic trade, galactic protection, galactic knowledge. Yuki's voice was flat. Earth needs this to work, Marcus. We're new out here. We have no allies, no protection. If we fail, our whole planet suffers. Marcus understood. He hated it, but he understood. The next morning, the humans attended their first class. Velmix stood at the front of the room and explained the philosophy of the Galactic Integration Academy. The galaxy is vast and complex, the Veleth said. Billions of species exist, each with their own instincts, their own desires, their own chaos. The Academy exists to create order from this chaos. We do not destroy what you are. We simply remove the parts that do not fit. We smooth the rough edges. We help you become the best version of yourself, the version that can contribute. Marcus looked around at his fellow humans. He saw the same expression on every face. It was the expression of someone being told that they were broken and needed to be fixed. But beneath that expression, he saw something else. Something harder. Something that said, "We will see about that." The Veleth had been teaching species to submit for 10,000 years. They had never failed, but they had never met humans before. 3 weeks passed at the Academy. The humans learned many things. They learned that the galaxy had rules for everything. There were rules for how to speak to other species. There were rules for how to walk in public spaces. There were rules for how to eat, how to sleep, how to think. Marcus found it exhausting. Every day, Velmix would explain a new set of regulations, and every day, Marcus would feel that twisting feeling in his stomach get a little worse. But the humans were also learning other things. Things the Veleth did not teach them. They learned that the neural compliance device had been used on every track, 7 species for the past 6,000 years. They learned that before the device existed, some species had found other ways to pass the Academy's tests. They learned that the Veleth did not like to talk about those species, and they learned about the adaptive assessment. It is the most important test you will face, Velmix explained one morning. You will be placed in a simulated environment. You will have 72 hours to reach an extraction beacon. The environment will present challenges designed to test your abilities. Success in this assessment is required for advancement. Corporal Okonkwo raised his hand. What happens if we fail? You will be given the opportunity to take the assessment again after receiving the neural compliance device. The device will help you overcome your natural limitations. Marcus understood now. The test was not really a test. It was a trap. It was designed to make you fail so that you would accept the implant. He looked at Yuki. She gave him a small nod. She understood too. The day of the assessment arrived. The 12 humans were taken to a large circular room with a glowing platform in the center. Other track 7 species were there too, the Malori, who looked like walking flowers with sensitive fronds instead of petals, and the Jux, who were small furry creatures that needed very specific humidity levels to survive. When the simulation begins, you will find yourselves in a forest environment, Felmix explained. The extraction beacon is located on a plateau approximately 2 kilometers from your starting position. You have 72 hours. Good luck. The world dissolved into light. Marcus blinked and found himself standing in a forest. But it was not like any forest he had ever seen. The trees were massive, reaching hundreds of meters into a purple sky. The air was thick and warm and smelled like copper. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. The other humans materialized around him. So did the Mallory and the Jux. For a moment, everyone just stood and stared at the alien landscape. "Well," said Private Santos, a young woman from Brazil who had been a professional rock climber before joining the program. "This is going to be interesting." They started walking. The Mallory took the lead at first. Their sensitive fronds could detect changes in air pressure and temperature, which helped them navigate. The Jux stayed in the middle of the group, their fur already starting to dry out in the warm air. After 2 hours, the ground began to change. What had been solid earth became soft and wet. Within another hour, it was a swamp. The Mallory stopped moving. Their roots, which extended from the bottom of their bodies, were not designed for wet conditions. "We must request extraction," the lead Mallory said. Its voice sounded like wind through leaves. "We cannot continue." "Wait," Marcus said. "Maybe we can help. We could carry you." "It is not permitted," the Mallory interrupted. "Cross-species assistance during assessment is against regulations. We must request extraction." The Mallory vanished in a shimmer of light. The Jux followed soon after. The humidity had dropped suddenly, and their bodies could not adapt quickly enough. Now only the humans remained. "They're picking us off," Yuki said. Her voice was calm, but Marcus could see the anger in her eyes. "The simulation is adapting to our weaknesses. Then we adapt back," Okonkwo said. They kept moving. The swamp got deeper. The temperature dropped. Night fell, and the purple sky turned black. Strange creatures moved in the darkness, not attacking, just watching. Waiting. By morning, they had lost 2 of their group. Private Williams had twisted his ankle badly in the dark. Private Park had developed a fever from something she had touched. Both had requested extraction. 10 humans remained, and then they saw the canyon. It was enormous. At least 1 kilometer wide, with walls that dropped straight down into darkness. On the other side, visible in the dim light, was a plateau. On the plateau, a beacon pulsed with blue light. "That was not in the briefing," Santos said. "Nothing about this was in the briefing," Marcus replied. They stood at the edge of the canyon and looked at the impossible gap. There was no bridge. There was no way down and back up. The walls were smooth stone that offered no handholds. Marcus felt something shift inside him. For a moment, he was not on an alien space station. He was back in Oregon, standing at the base of a Douglas fir, looking up at branches that reached toward the sky. His grandmother stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "The tree knows how to grow," she had said. "You just have to learn how to climb." Marcus turned and looked at the forest behind them. Really looked at it. The trees were massive, yes, but they were still trees. They had branches. They had bark. They had roots that connected underground and canopies that touched overhead, and some of those canopies extended over the canyon. "Guys," Marcus said slowly, "I have an idea." Yuki followed his gaze. Her eyes went wide. "You cannot be serious," she said. "We're going to climb the trees," Marcus said. "We're going to cross through the canopy." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Santos started to laugh. It was not a scared laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just realized they were not trapped after all. One by one, the other humans started laughing too, somewhere in a monitoring room. Administrator Dexilin watched the feeds and tried to understand why the humans were laughing at an impossible obstacle. It did not make sense. Nothing about these creatures made sense. The first tree was the hardest. Marcus stood at its base and looked up at the trunk that disappeared into the purple sky. The bark was rough and strange, covered in ridges that spiraled upward like a twisted staircase. He pressed his hand against it and felt the texture under his fingers. "The bark is strong," he said. "It will hold our weight." "How do you know?" asked Private Chun, no relation to Marcus. Just a coincidence of names that had caused some confusion in the first week. Marcus smiled. "Because I have been climbing trees since I was 4 years old. My grandmother taught me. She said that every tree wants to be climbed. You just have to find the path it offers you." He started climbing. His fingers found the ridges in the bark. His feet pressed into the gaps. His body remembered movements that his ancestors had made millions of years ago, when they lived in the forests of Africa and the trees were home. Within minutes, he was 20 meters up. Within an hour, he had reached the first major branches. The view from up there was incredible. He could see the whole simulation spread out below him, the swamp they had crossed, the starting point in the distance, the canyon that stretched like a wound in the earth. And ahead, the canopy extended over the gap, a highway of branches and leaves that connected this side to the plateau. "It works," he called down. "Start climbing. I will mark the path." One by one, the humans began their ascent. Santos was fastest. Her years of rock climbing had given her strength and balance that made the others look clumsy. Okonkwo was slower, but steady, his large hands gripping the bark with careful determination. Yuki climbed with the efficiency of someone who treated every movement as a problem to be solved. They used strips of fabric torn from their uniforms to mark the best routes. They called warnings to each other about weak branches and loose bark. When Private Kim started to slip, 3 hands reached out simultaneously to catch him. Administrator Dexilin watched from the monitoring room. Around it, other Velith observers had gathered, their crystal bodies pulsing with colors that indicated confusion and concern. "What are they doing?" asked Instructor Velmix. "They appeared to be climbing the trees," Dexilin replied. "That is not possible. The trees are over 100 meters tall. No Track 7 species has the physical capability to. They are doing it anyway." The simulation's difficulty algorithms activated. This was normal. The system was designed to increase challenges as candidates progressed. The temperature dropped sharply. Wind began to blow through the canopy. Some of the branches started to move on their own, shifting position to create gaps where solid paths had been. The humans adapted. When the branches moved, they found new routes. When the wind blew, they pressed their bodies close to the trunks and waited for it to pass. When the temperature dropped, they climbed faster to generate heat. Marcus was leading the group through the canopy when he came to a gap too wide to cross. The nearest branch on the other side was at least 4 meters away, too far to jump, too far to reach. He stopped and studied the problem. Behind him, the other humans waited. "What do we do?" asked Santos. Marcus looked at the branch above his head. Then he looked at the gap. Then he smiled. "Have you ever seen old movies about swinging through the jungle?" he asked. "You want to swing across," Yuki said. It was not a question. "The branch is flexible enough. If I climb up and use my body weight to bend it downward, it should carry me across the gap. Then I can reach back for the next person. And if it breaks, then I fall 100 meters and the simulation probably extracts me before I hit the ground." Marcus shrugged. Better than giving up. He climbed up to the higher branch. He tested its flexibility with his weight. Then he wrapped his arms around it and let himself drop. The branch bent like a bow. For one terrible moment, Marcus thought it would snap. Then it carried him forward in a smooth arc, swinging him across the gap and depositing him on the other side. With surprising gentleness, he found a stable position and reached back across the gap. Next person. Come on. One by one, they crossed. Some swung like Marcus had. Others were pulled across by human chains, hands gripping branches. When Private Williams, who had injured his ankle earlier but refused extraction, could not grip the branch, they fashioned a harness from torn fabric and carried him. The simulation responded with more challenges. Rain began to fall, making the branches slick. Creatures appeared in the canopy, not aggressive, but blocking paths and forcing detours. One section of trees began to vibrate, shaking hard enough to dislodge anyone not holding on tightly. The humans held on. They adjusted. They kept moving. In the monitoring room, Dex Illen had been joined by Archivist Quellen, a Velith whose role was to remember the history of the Academy. Quellen's crystal body was very old, filled with cracks and impurities that caught the light in strange ways. Remarkable, Quellen said. They are cheating, Velmix insisted. The assessment is designed for ground-based traversal. They are circumventing the intended parameters. The parameters state only that they must reach the beacon, Quellen replied. No methodology is specified, because no methodology was necessary. Species either possess the capability to traverse standard obstacles, or they require augmentation. This has been consistent for 10,000 years. Lexillan was not listening to the argument. It was watching the humans work together, watching them solve problems that should have been impossible, watching them move through the canopy like they belonged there. There was a word in the old Velith language, a word they had not used in thousands of years. It meant those who climb when they should fall. Daxillan had thought it was just a myth. The humans reached the plateau with 19 hours to spare. They touched the extraction beacon, and the simulation registered their success, but they did not request extraction. What are they doing now? Velmix asked. Marcus had turned away from the beacon. He was looking back at the canopy, back at the route they had taken. Then he started climbing again. They are going back, Dexillan said, its voice filled with something that might have been wonder. They are going back for the ones they lost. Private Williams and Private Park were still in the simulation, injured and waiting for the test to end. The remaining humans had passed. They could have left at any time. But instead, they returned. They climbed back through the canopy. They found their injured companions, and they carried them to the beacon. All 12 humans extracted together. In the monitoring room, Dexillan made a decision. It would call a council meeting, the first in 300 years. These humans needed to be discussed. Because if they could climb through the canopy of an alien forest, what else could they do? The council chamber had not been used in 3 centuries. Dust covered the ancient seats, and the lighting systems flickered uncertainly as they powered up for the first time in generations. 7 Velith sat in a circle, their crystal bodies glowing with colors that shifted as they communicated in frequencies too complex for most species to understand. Administrator. Dexillan stood in the center of the circle and presented the data. Holographic images showed the humans climbing through the canopy. Charts displayed their vital signs, heart rates elevated, stress hormones flooding their systems, every biological indicator screaming that they should have frozen or fled. But they had not frozen. They had not fled. They had climbed. This is impossible, said Counselor Methax, whose crystal structure was deep red and very old. Track 7 species cannot pass the adaptive assessment without augmentation. This has been proven across 10,000 years and billions of subjects. And yet they passed, Dexillan replied. All 12 of them, including 2 who were injured. They cheated, Instructor Velmix said. It had been allowed to attend the council meeting to provide context. They circumvented the intended methodology. They used the trees instead of the ground. Archivist Quellen made a sound that might have been a laugh. Velmix, The assessment parameters say nothing about ground-based traversal. I have checked the original documents, the documents written when this test was first designed. The only requirement is that subjects reach the beacon within the time limit. The humans did exactly that. But the spirit of the test, Quillen interrupted, was to determine which species could adapt to challenges. The humans adapted. They simply adapted in a way we did not expect. The council fell silent. Colors pulsed through their bodies as they processed this information. Finally, Councillor Thralvin spoke. She was the youngest member of the council, only 2,000 years old, and her crystal structure still had the clarity of youth. I wish to see these humans. Bring their leader before us. Marcus Chun had been waiting in a small room for 3 hours. Nobody had told him why he was there. Nobody had told him anything. He sat on a hard bench and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. When the door opened and Velmix appeared, Marcus expected to be punished. He expected to be told that he had violated some rule he had never heard of, that the humans would be expelled, that Earth would be classified as non-contributive. Instead, Velmix said, "The council wishes to speak with you. Follow me." The council chamber was unlike anything Marcus had seen on the station. The room was circular and ancient, filled with symbols carved into the walls that seemed to move when he looked at them directly. 7 Velith sat in a ring around him, their crystalline bodies glowing with colors he had never seen before. He felt very small, very young, very human. Marcus Chun, said the largest Velith, who Marcus assumed was the leader. We have observed your performance in the adaptive assessment. We have questions. Marcus swallowed. I will try to answer them. You were told to reach the beacon. The path was blocked by obstacles that should have been insurmountable for your species. Yet you succeeded. How? We climbed the trees, Marcus said. The ground was blocked, so we went up instead. But why did you think to climb? Other species faced the same obstacles. They requested extraction. They accepted their limitations. Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about his grandmother and the Douglas firs of Oregon. He thought about his ancestors, millions of years ago, living in the forests of a world these ancient beings had probably never heard of. I do not know if I can explain it, he said finally. Climbing is something my species has always done. When we were still animals, we lived in trees. When we became something more, we climbed mountains. When we wanted to reach the sky, we built towers. When we wanted to reach the stars, we built rockets. He paused. We see something high, something that seems impossible, and something inside us says, I want to go there. We do not really know how to stop that feeling. Councillor Threlvin leaned forward. But the other species in the assessment, they also have evolutionary histories. They also have instincts. Why did they not adapt as you did? I do not know about other species, Marcus admitted. But I know that when I see an obstacle, my first thought is not, this is impossible. My first thought is, how do I get around this? Maybe other species think differently. They think realistically, Velmix muttered. They accept what is and is not possible. With respect, Marcus said, and he was surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. That sounds very limiting. The council chambers went very quiet. Colors flickered through the Velith bodies, yellows and oranges that Marcus was starting to associate with strong emotions. You were told to adjust to our system, Vexillan said slowly. Instead, you adjusted the challenge itself. You changed the parameters of the problem. We solved the problem, Marcus said. Is that not what adjustment means? Nobody answered him. Councillor Methax, the oldest of the Velith, spoke for the first time in the conversation. 10,000 years ago, we created this academy because the galaxy was chaos. Species warred with each other. Resources were wasted. Potential was lost. We created a system that would bring order, that would take the chaos of individual minds and shape them into something productive. I understand, Marcus said, though he was not sure he did. No, Methax continued. You do not. For 10,000 years, this system has worked. Species arrive with chaos in their minds, and they leave ready to contribute. They are not unhappy. They are not harmed. They are simply streamlined, made efficient, made useful. The old Veleth's body pulsed with a deep blue color that Marcus had never seen before. But you have made me wonder something, human. Something I have not wondered in millennia. A pause. What have we lost in all that efficiency? What chaos did we cut away that might have been valuable? Marcus did not have an answer, but he felt something shift in the room, some ancient weight that had been settled for thousands of years beginning to move. You may return to your quarters, Dexillan said. The council will deliberate on what has happened here. Marcus stood and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back to look at the ancient beings sitting in their ancient circle. On my planet, he said, we have a saying. The tree that bends in the wind does not break. I think the Veleth have been very strong for a very long time. But I wonder if you have forgotten how to bend. He left before anyone could respond. In the council chamber, the 7 Veleth sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the galaxy continued to turn. Stars were born and died. Species rose and fell. And in a small room on Station Meridian 7, 12 humans were about to change everything. 6 months had passed since the adaptive assessment. The humans had not taken the neural compliance device. They had refused politely, then firmly, then with a stubbornness that the Veleth found deeply confusing. It is required, Velmic said for perhaps the 100th time. All Track 7 species must accept augmentation. This is not negotiable. We understand, Yuki Tanaka replied. She had become the official spokesperson for the human group, mostly because she could remain calm when everyone else wanted to start shouting. But we are requesting an exemption based on our performance in the assessment. There is no exemption process. Then, we are requesting that you create one. This was how it went, day after day. The Veleth would state that something was required or forbidden or impossible, and the humans would find a way around it. They were not aggressive. They were not rude. They were simply relentless. When told they could not access certain computer systems without neural integration, the humans spent 3 weeks studying the systems until they found another way in. When informed that non-compliant species could not hold command positions, they created new roles for themselves, advisors and consultants, who somehow became essential to every project they touched. When threatened with expulsion, they pointed out that their assessment scores were among the highest in 1,000 years. Administrator Dexillan watched all of this with something that felt almost like amusement. It was a strange sensation for a being that was mostly crystal and light. But there it was. The other species on the station had noticed the humans too. Word spread quickly in enclosed environments, and soon everyone knew about the species that had climbed through the canopy instead of walking through the swamp. Stories grew in the telling by the time they reached some parts of the station. The humans had apparently fought off monsters with their bare hands and flown across the canyon using nothing but determination. The truth was impressive enough. Other Track 7 species began asking questions. If the humans could pass the assessment without augmentation, why could they not? What if the neural compliance device was not actually necessary? What if there were other ways to succeed? 18 species formally requested human-style problem-solving consultants within the first 3 months. By month 6, that number had grown to 47. The council met again. This time, the chamber was clean and well-lit. This time, all 12 humans were invited to attend. Marcus stood in the center of the circle, flanked by Yuki and Okonkwo. The other 9 humans stood behind them in a loose group that somehow looked more unified than any formal formation could have achieved. "You have created a problem," Counselor Metheg said. There was no anger in the ancient Velez voice, just a kind of tired curiosity. "For 10,000 years, the neural compliance device has been the foundation of our integration program. Now, because of you, other species are questioning it. They are refusing augmentation. They are demanding alternatives." "With respect," Marcus said, "that sounds like progress. It sounds like chaos. Maybe." Marcus looked around at his fellow humans, at the crystal beings who had ruled this station for millennia, at the ancient walls that had seen so many species come and go. But maybe chaos is not always bad. Maybe sometimes you need a little disorder to find new ways in doing things. Counselor Threlvin spoke. "Administrator Thexilin tells us that you have been helping other species pass the assessment, teaching them your methods. Is this true?" "Yes," Yuki said. "We have been teaching them to look for alternative solutions, to use their natural abilities instead of replacing them with technology, to work together in ways that the standard curriculum does not encourage. And what do you gain from this?" "Allies," Okonkwo said. His deep voice filled the chamber. "Friends, people who will stand beside us when things get difficult. On our planet, we have learned that survival is not a solo activity. The species that work together are the species that last." The council was silent for a long moment. Colors pulsed through their crystalline bodies, a conversation happening in frequencies the humans could not perceive. Finally, Thexilin spoke. "You were told to adjust to our system. You have not done this. Instead, you have adjusted our system to you. You have changed things that have not changed in millennia." Marcus felt his heart beating hard in his chest. This was the moment. Either the Veleth would accept what the humans had done, or they would expel them, send them back to Earth, close the door on everything they had worked for. "When I was young," Thexilin continued, "there was a concept in our philosophy called the uncut crystal. It referred to potential, to the idea that every being contains possibilities that have not yet been realized. Over the millennia, we forgot this concept. We became focused on efficiency, on productivity, on usefulness. We cut the crystals into shapes we found acceptable, and we lost the beauty of what they might have become." The ancient administrator's body glowed with a soft white light. "You have reminded us of something we forgot, humans. You have reminded us that adjustment does not always mean submission, that climbing is not the same as cheating, that chaos can create as well as destroy." Marcus could hardly breathe. He felt Yuki's hand grip his arm. "The council has made a decision," Thexilin said. "The neural compliance program will be suspended for a period of evaluation. During this time, we will study your methods. We will observe how you integrate without augmentation. We will learn what we have missed in 10,000 years of certainty." "And after the evaluation period?" Yuki asked. "That depends on what we learn. But I think," Thexilin's crystal body pulsed with colors that seemed almost warm, "I think the Galactic Integration Academy is about to become a very different place." 50 years later, Marcus Chen returned to Station Meridian 7. His hair was gray now, and his bones ached in the cold of space. But he walked through the corridors with the easy stride of someone who knew exactly where he belonged. The station had changed. The gray walls had been painted with murals created by dozens of species. The rigid corridors had been softened with plants and art and spaces designed for gathering rather than efficient travel. Laughter echoed through hallways that had once been silent, and in the center of the station, in a glass-enclosed garden that had not existed 50 years ago, a Douglas fir tree grew toward artificial stars. Marcus stopped beside it and placed his hand on the bark. The tree had been grown from a seed he had brought from Earth. planted in alien soil on the day the neural compliance program was officially ended. It was not the same as the forests of Oregon, but it was alive and growing and reaching for the sky. "You were right, grandmother," he said quietly. "The world tried to make us small, but we did not let it." A young cadet stopped beside him, a being from a species Marcus did not recognize, with scales that shimmered like rainbows and eyes that held curiosity and hope. "Are you Marcus Chen?" the cadet asked. "The human who climbed the tree?" Marcus smiled. "I am just someone who saw a different path and decided to take it. Nothing more." The cadet looked up at the Douglas fir, at the branches reaching toward the light. "Can you teach me how to climb?" Marcus looked at the young being, at the hope in its eyes, at the potential that had not yet been shaped by 10,000 years of enforced efficiency. "Of course," he said. "That is what we do. We teach each other to reach for things that seem impossible. And sometimes, when we are very lucky, we find that they were possible all along." Outside the garden, the galaxy continued to turn. But something had changed in the way it turned. Something had shifted in the ancient patterns. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought their chaos with them, and the galaxy, slowly and with great surprise, was learning that chaos could be beautiful.